haunting you. He wants to go for a walk.
Hey,
He looks so big there. He looks so tall. Oh,
I know.
buddy. He talks. He talk. Ew, he
What
smells your
the fuck?
stank underwear.
Those
Ew.
are those are
Ew,
short.
you're stinky gross. He's like, ew, ew.
That was the worst thing to ever happen to
I
me.
streamed that. Clip that
It's
later.
okay, they're
Holy
just
shit.
shorts. They're just
That's so
shorts.
funny. What the fuck?
It's really funny. Oh my god.
The way he pawed at it, dude.
Yeah, what the fuck? You're supposed to be on my side, bro.
Alright, so we're back in the present. Do you know what was happening in the present?
No, you need to
They were
update me.
in they were in Shilian's parents' tomb, and
Right.
Chi-Rong had just taken over the body of that kid's father, and so
Yes.
he dared Shilian to stab him and kill this innocent guy whose body he was possessing, but Shilian
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was thinking about it, and then he like raised his sword to swing, and we don't know if he swung down yet.
Whoa. Whoa.
Alright, I love this chapter, it's so cute. Chapter 41, The Mid-Autumn Festival. Clang, sparks flew. The blade penetrated deep into the stone floor. With both hands gripping the hilt, Shilian bowed his head and rested his forehead upon it. His teeth were gritted so hard they could have been ground to powder in his mouth. Useless trash! Chirong laughed out loud. What useless trash! I knew you wouldn't dare kill me. No matter how I humiliate you, no matter how I drag you through the mud, so long as I have a knife to someone else's throat, you can't do a thing to me. You useless coward. What's a god like you still alive for? However, Shilian had already completely calmed. He looked up, his eyes cold. Don't rejoice so soon. I can't do anything to you, but there's someone who can. Chirong humped. Are you planning to hug Junwoo's legs and beg him to help you again? Dream on. Did he care back then? Hmm? And you still shamelessly follow on his heels. Are you really that stupid? Shilian peeled that magnificent, stately, god-pleasing costume off of Chirong. Then he called Royer first, forth and tossed Chirong aside once he was bound. You better keep your mouth shut. I'm not afraid of you. You've got nothing on me, Chirong retorted. Well, are you afraid of Hua Cheng? Shilian asked. Chirong's smile froze as Shilian threatened quietly. Just to give you a heads up, if one of these days I fall into a bad mood, I might hand you over to Hua Cheng and have him think up a way to deal with you. So watch yourself, you hear me? Chirong couldn't laugh anymore, not with that threat on the table. Terrified, he cried, What the fuck? You're vicious! I can't believe you'd come up with something like that. Why not just hand me over to Long Chinchou? Shilian knelt on the floor. One by one, he picked up the small, coarse granules from the ground and from under the coffin. Truthfully, for the time being, he wouldn't be delivering Chirong to the upper court, and the reason for that was specifically Lan Chinchou. If Shilian surrendered Chirong, and Lan Chinchou learned of Chirong's whereabouts, Lan Chinchou would immediately charge in with his sword to kill Chirong. Should Chirong be killed? That was a headache-inducing question. If he was killed, then what next? Another question that prompted headaches. For the moment, it would be unwise to hand Chirong to the upper court. All things considered, requesting Hua Cheng's help certainly sounded like a good idea, but really, Shilian was only using Hua Cheng's name to scare Chirong a little. After all, he had already troubled Hua Cheng too many times, and whenever something happened, he thought of Hua Cheng first. Doing so yet again almost felt like he was being overly familiar. Even using Hua Cheng's name to scare Chirong made Shilian feel rather embarrassed. Chirong turned his head and spat a mouthful of blood, and the child reached out pathetically to rub his forehead. Dad, are you okay? Does it hurt? Chirong seemed to greatly enjoy playing this game of father and son, and he responded with a sing-song derision. My good son! Daddy is just fine! The rims around Shilian's eyes were red as he picked up each of those granules, and he placed them in the utmost care upon the god-pleasing costume. The child quietly crawled over to help Shilian gather them. Shilian saw those little hands and glanced up at him. The child said in a small voice, Gaga. Won't you stop beating up my dad? Let us go. We won't steal from you again. Shilian felt a twinge in his heart, but he forced the feeling away. What's your name, little one? My name is Gazelle, the child said. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Shilian finished collecting the ashes and wrapped them in the costume's layers, then tied it up neatly before placing the bundle within the coffin anew and closing the cover. He then slowly replied, Gazelle, that's not your dad, it's someone else. Your dad has been possessed. He's currently a bad guy. Gazelle was only confused by this explanation. He couldn't comprehend what he was being told. Someone else? No, I recognize him. He's my dad. Chiron commended this response. Not bad, not bad. I picked up a cheap son. What a great bargain. Oof! Shilian kicked him. Gazelle was still young and had, for all his life, been dependent on his father, so he was quite attached to the body Chiron now possessed and refused to abandon it so easily. Shilian couldn't think of a way to manage the situation at the moment. With the sword Fengshin on his back, he solemnly kowtowed thrice towards the two coffins. Then, with Shirong dangling from his left hand and Geza tucked under his right arm, he left Mount Taisong and returned with all speed to Puchi village. He had been gone for many days, and it was deep into the night by the time they made it back. The doors to Puchi Shrine were wide open, and clouds of incense rolled out. Upon the altar, the incense burner was stuffed to the brim with fragrant sticks, and the table itself was piled with offerings. Shilian swept a look across the altar as he entered, then grabbed 2 meat buns. He passed one to Geza and rudely stuffed the other into Chirong's mouth. That body was alive, after all. Until Shilian figured out how to yank Chirong out of the man, he required sustenance. Chirong spat out the meat bun with a curse at its foul taste. With no small bit of worry in his tone, he yelled, Hey! You won't actually hand me over to Hua Chung, will you? Shilian sneered. Are you very scared? He didn't have time for this nonsense, and turned around to rummage through his collection of pickle pots. Me? Scared? Chirong stubbornly scoffed. You should be the one who's scared. You're a heavenly official, but you dare pal around with a supreme. You. While he rambled, his eyes suddenly locked onto something. When Shilian bent down, something had peeked out the front of his robes. It was that crystal clear ring. That was what caught Chirong's eye. Chirong seemed to be suspicious, though Shilian didn't notice his stare. After a moment, Chirong asked, Cousin Crown Prince, what's that thing hanging around your neck? Shilian had planned on ignoring him, but Chirong had brought up something he himself was curious about. He turned around, his finger hooked on the thin silver chain. This? Do you know about it? Bring it here, let me see. I'll tell you. Chirong beckoned. If you know, then just say it, Shilian replied. If you don't, then shut up. You're always so nasty to the people close to you, Chirong grumbled bitterly. If you're so impressive, why don't you cop an attitude with strangers? Shilian tucked the silver chain back into the inner layers of his robe, pressing it against his skin as he straightened it. If you're so impressive, keep talking. I'll keep count of every word, and each one will take you a step closer to Hua Chung's blade. Without realizing it, Shilian had somehow grown used to leveraging Hua Chung's name. Chirong sneered. Don't you use him to scare me. Maybe one of these days you'll be the one dead under someone else's blade. Don't you want to know what that thing is? I, who number among the 4 calamities, shall tell you. That's a cursed ornament, an object of misfortune. Throw it out, and quickly. I can't believe you'd keep it on you. Are you that scared of living after hanging around here for so long? Hearing this, Shilian straightened up immediately. Is that true? Duh, Chirong said. I'm telling you, man or ghost. Whoever gave that to you must not mean well. Oh, Shilian squatted down again. What do you mean, oh? Chirong cried. Shilian didn't bother turning his face as he calmly responded. Oh, just means that it'd take a miracle for anyone to actually believe the things you say. I choose to believe in the person who gave this to me, and I've decided to keep wearing it. Shilian had always been gentle and courteous to others, but he was exceptionally cold towards Chirong. Chirong was vexed to death, cussing nonstop, and Shilian simply pretended to hear nothing. He realized that he couldn't find the pot that contained Ban Yue, so no matter how thoroughly he looked and thought, perhaps the Windmaster already came by to take her away? As he listened to Chirong, he suddenly felt something was off. Strange. Chirong was obviously terrified of Hua Chung, so why was he still trying to provoke Shilian? As if as if Chi-Rong was trying to distract him on purpose. Realizing this, Shilian startled. He shot Chi-Rong a glare, and sure enough, he saw the ghost avert his gaze for an instant, looking mighty suspicious. An inexplicable gut feeling made Shilian look up. Not too far overhead, he spied a black-clothed man, with his back pressed against the ceiling beams, adhered there like a giant bat. Shilian immediately unsheathed Fengqin. His sword is like named something that sounds so similar to Fengqin, so it's confusing. Fengqin, and hurled the sword up. Back pressed against the beam as it was, the man had to dodge the attack by whirling around and tumbling to the ground. Guza dropped his meat bun in fright and wailed. Before Chi-Rong could scream too, Roya sealed his mouth and dragged him to the corner before binding him anew. At first, Shilian had thought this was one of Chi-Rong's lackeys, but after exchanging a few blows, he noticed this man was fast, aggressive, and oddly familiar. He could say with considerable certainty that, at Chi-Rong's level of competence, he lacked the power to command such a talented subject. Then he spotted something hugged in the crook of the man's other arm. Upon closer look, it was a black pot, the very one that contained Ban Yue. The Windmaster hadn't taken Ban Yue away? Shilian instantly deduced who this was and blurted out, "Little Pei!" Pei Jr. It seemed Little Pei had come to steal Ban Yue, but he'd unexpectedly run into Shilian as he returned, and had no choice but to hide above on the wooden beam. Because Chi-Rong was bound by Royer, and lying on the ground, he had immediately seen Pei Shu. Chi-Rong didn't know who he was, but if it was something harmful to Shilian, he thought it must be beneficial to himself. Chi-Rong was afraid Shilian would sense someone was lurking and purposely kept trying to distract him with noise, yet somehow Shilian still noticed in the end. Shilian bore 2 cursed shackles, and Pei Shu was in exile. Neither had any spiritual power, so they could only fight barehanded. But Shilian had fought through his 800 years with nothing but his fists, so how could Pei Shu possibly compare? It didn't take many rounds for Shilian to subdue him. "Give back the pot!" Shilian only shouted that offhandedly, but much to his surprise, Pei Shu really threw the pickle pot to him. Startled, Shilian thought, is General Pei Jr. really this easy to convince that he'd return the pot simply when asked? Don't we usually have to push each other around a bit longer for this kind of thing? As Pei Shu threw the pot, he urged Shilian in a desperate, hushed voice, "Hurry and go!" His tone sounded genuinely anxious. Shilian stretched out his hands to catch the pot as it flew at him, but it suddenly changed course and flew out the window. In the next moment they heard another man's voice coming from some distance away. "You've really disappointed me." The colors of Pei Shu's face changed. "General!" He and Shilian rushed out of Puchi Shrine. Sure enough, on the roof of a house in the distance stood Pei Ming. He was dressed in casual attire rather than his usual armor, and he looked exceptionally dashing, standing tall and slender, with his confidence bright as the sun. The pot leisurely flew over to Pei Ming, then stopped, floating there. With a relaxed hand resting on the hilt of his sword, he spoke to Pei Shu, who stood below. "A man looks at the big picture and puts his career first. You're meant for great things, so what's going on with you? You'd screw yourself over for a little girl? Do you consider yourself such an immature brat?" Pei Shu hung his head low and didn't speak. "You rose to your position in only 200 years, Pei Ming continued. "Do you think it's easy for everyone? I paved the road for you. It's easy to go down, but it ain't easy coming back up. They say it's lonely at the top, but whenever a god of heaven descended, they usually preferred to find high places to stand. The higher they were, the easier to regally survey all below. Julien himself used to have that awful habit, but after he fell that one time, his leg ached terribly whenever he perched up high. This had quickly put an end to that tendency." All this being said, the tallest building within Puchi village was the village head's home, and it was a simple tiled roof house. General Pei really was doing himself a disservice by choosing it as the place to strike a pose. However, that was besides the point. The point was, with a simple glance, Shilian knew exactly what was going on. Previously, Pei Ming had intended to pin blame on Ben Yue to clear Pei Shu's name, and Shilian had stopped him. When he stood before Junwu, Pei Ming appeared to have given up, but he obviously hadn't abandoned the idea. After that rotten business with the gilded banquet got out, Shilian could barely take care of himself, and his reputation had no doubt plummeted. General Pei probably thought it was an opportune moment to dredge up old affairs, hence why he was trying to drag both Pei Shu and Ban Yue back to the upper court to appeal for a new trial. Truly relentless. However, Pei Shu didn't seem overly enthusiastic about the prospect, and he only breathed a sigh. General, let's forget about this whole affair. You! Pei Ming looked speechless and exasperated. He had to be quite frustrated to lecture Pei Shu without caring about Shi Lian's presence. Moments later, he suddenly declared, Well, now I have to see what kind of amazing girl could make all my hard work go down the drain. He reached out, seeming like he planned to shatter the pot. This way of opening it wouldn't normally pose a problem, but the issue was that Shi Lian didn't know whether Banyue's wounds had healed. If they had not, then it would be bad if the pot was opened so violently. Shi Lian's face dropped and he lunged forward. Don't break it! Before Pei Ming's hand even touched the thing, the pot unexpectedly exploded by itself with a bang. The air was choked with the smell of pickles, so strong it could drive any man mad. Pei Ming stood closest to the pot and was unfortunately completely plastered with pickles, and he was utterly flabbergasted by the sudden shower. The clear, sonorous voice of a woman rang through the air. General Pei is such an honorable man. A white-robed individual whirled out of that small pot. At first she was only the size of a fist, but the more she flipped, the larger she became. Shi Lian looked closer and cried, Lord Windmaster! The one concealed in the pickle pot wasn't Banyue. It was Shi Qingxuan. She had hidden in the pot and blown a barrage of pickles at Pei Ming, but she herself had not a single stain on her fluttering white robes. She landed steadily and swung her whisk. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Good thing I already sent that little miss to someone else, otherwise she wouldn't have escaped General Pei's far-reaching arm. Pei Ming prided himself on his charm and maintained good manners in all his endeavors, yet now he stank of pickles. In the face of Shi Qingxuan in female form, he was feeling a little woeful, even as he kept up that mannered bearing. Qingxuan, must you antagonize me like this? If it were anyone else, Pei Ming probably would have beaten them to a pulp already, but considering Shi Qingxuan's older brother, Pei Ming could do nothing but pick off the pickles. He brushed back his hair and gritted his teeth as he shook his head. You better not let me find out where you sent that little girl, or I'll certainly pay a personal visit. The tone of his voice made his meaning clear. Daring to take in Banyue meant seeking to oppose him, and he planned to seek trouble. But Shi Qingxuan simply clapped. That's easy. It doesn't matter if I tell you where I sent her. I'd love to see you go visit. Listen well. Little Miss is currently staying at Mount Yulong, at the Rainmaster's mountain retreat. You dare go? At her words, the colors of Pei Ming's face changed slightly, and he didn't appear as confident as he had before. He schooled his expression, and suddenly grew serious. Qingxuan, you're still young. That's why you like to fight over every little thing for the sake of justice. When you get older, you hopefully won't regret the things you're doing now. Then he leapt off the roof and disappeared. He actually left in quite a hurry. Shi Lian felt a little bewildered. He sensed there was some sort of implication to Pei Ming's words. So he asked, Lord Windmaster, what did he mean? Shi Qingxuan brushed it off. Nothing but empty threats. Pei Shu watched Pei Ming's silhouette disappear before coming over to greet the other two. Lord Windmaster, Your Highness. Shi Qingxuan patted his shoulders. Little Pei, very honest of you to come stop your general. Take good care of yourself down here, and turn over a new leaf. If there's a chance, I'll speak well of you in the upper court. Don't you worry. Pei Shu was speechless for a moment, but replied, Thank you, my lord. However, I can't help but think you've misunderstood. General Pei isn't usually like this. It's only because of what happened in the past that he's overly worried about me. Besides, you also know that Lord Rainmaster... In the end, Pei Shu seemed to feel he had said too much after all, so he shook his head and cupped his hands. Farewell. The two of them watched him leave, and Shi Lian spoke again. Lord Windmaster, the Lord Rainmaster you spoke of earlier, was it Rainmaster Huang? Shi Qingxuan turned back around. That's right, the Rainmaster hasn't changed in centuries. What, someone you know? An acquaintance? Shi Lian shook his head and said softly, Although I haven't had the honor of meeting the Rainmaster, I owe a debt, and I am profoundly grateful. Shi Qingxuan smiled. Indeed. Even though there aren't many who are acquainted with the Rainmaster, those who have never spoken a bad word. Well, except Pei Ming. Is there a quarrel between them? Shi Lian asked. Naturally. Anyone who's hung around the upper court for so long has some sort of quarrel or collusion underfoot. Let me tell you, The Rainmaster traumatized Pei Ming deeply. Traumatized? Shilian wondered. He'd always thought the Lord Rainmaster was just someone who worked the fields. You know Pei Ming, Shi Qingxuan said. He's got plenty of descendants. His grand, however many sons, are everywhere. Before Little Pei, there used to be another deputy god at the palace of Mingguang, and he was also a descendant who was first appointed as general, then ascended. Shilian was amazed. General Pei sure has many talented descendants. Not just anyone could turn the art of ascension into an inherited family business. Shi Qingxuan snapped her fan open and continued. He was indeed talented, but he was more or less the same as Pei Ming, powerful and packed with personal problems. That deputy official often stirred up trouble in other people's domains, but no one dared say much because Pei Ming stood behind him, until one day he messed around in the vicinity of the former kingdom of Yushi. Holed up deep in the mountains, the Lord Rainmaster rarely ventures out and spends the days planting fields, hence that nickname, Old Farmer of the Deep Mountains, Rainmaster Huang. But who would have thought? The moment the Rainmaster emerged, that descendant of Pei Ming was beaten to a pulp. He was dragged back to the heavens, thrown in front of the Heavenly Emperor, and sentenced to exile. Why does this story sound so familiar? Shilian mused. At first, Pei Ming thought, exile? Whatever, I'll just fish him back up in 100 years, Shi Qingxuan continued. But how much can happen in the mortal realm in a century? Every year, every day even, new and impressive talents flare to life in a flurry. You can barely keep count. It only took 10 years for that deputy official's devotees to turn to a new god, and after 50 years he was completely forgotten. So after 100 years he could no longer be recalled. That young heavenly official had a once boundless future. With a once boundless future was no more. His talents wasted. It wasn't until Little Pei came around that Pei Ming found another right hand he liked. No wonder General Pei was doing everything in his power to restore Little Pei's position. With that president, he was afraid Little Pei would be ruined too. All the same, his methods couldn't be considered correct. Julien mused upon it, then sighed. The human world. Shi Qingxuan agreed. Yeah, you'll always wear down your spiritual power, and will to fight if you dally too long in the mortal realm. The pair nodded to themselves. The difference, however, was that Shilian nodded unconsciously, whereas Shi Qingxuan was intentionally nodding in an exaggerated manner. After nodding that way for a while, Shilian abruptly remembered an incredibly important individual. Lang Ying, that child! So remember, there's a child that they found, that fucked up little child. They named it Lang Ying, which is the same name as the guy that he fought in the past. Too many things had happened all at
Wow.
once. The excitement had been too great, and he had forgotten all about the boy. Are you talking about the child you brought back from Paradise Manor? Shi Qingxuan piped up. The Heavenly Emperor has seen to him, and he's currently at my place. I'll bring him down for you later. There's still Qirong and another child locked up inside Puchi Shrine. I can't let anyone see them, Shilian thought. So he replied, How can I trouble you with that? Why don't I go up instead? Shi Qingxuan nodded in delight. Same difference. Incidentally, it'll be the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet soon. It's a once-a-year event. You shouldn't miss it. This year my brother will be back for it too. I'll introduce you. Shilian couldn't help but smile at her tone, which brimmed with pride over her elder brother. The Mid-Autumn Festival banquet, huh? Every year for the Mid-Autumn Festival, all of heaven held a banquet to celebrate. During the gathering, they gazed down on the mortal realm's festivities as entertainment. But besides that, a very important game occurred during the banquet, a sort of grand finale to the feast, the Battle of Lanterns. Not just anyone could offer a blessings lantern. During the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet, what the gods battled over was the number of blessing lanterns their devotees offered at their main temple. Everyone said, It's only a game. No need to take it seriously. We're just playing around, don't mind it. But in reality, how many of them genuinely didn't care? Hi, Scout. Is it dinner?
Oh,
I have to go
yeah.
eat. I'll be back. Bye.
My